Welcome to Wild and Exposed, your number one adventure, nature, and outdoor photography podcast. Wild and Exposed is hosted by Michael Mauro, Ron Hayes, and Jason Loftus, and Mark Raycroft. Thanks for tuning in.
We're back for part 2 of Mark's 6 weeks in the Canadian wilderness. We've got the whole crew online again tonight, and Mark shut me down when I started asking questions about moving east of the Canadian Rockies. So tonight we're going to hear about the trip out to the east.
But before we do that, we should do a little promo on our sponsor promo, which we mentioned in the last podcast, but just to reiterate, because this promotion is going to go from now until the end of the year. So it'll be good for the holidays. If you listen to the last podcast, you heard all about it. But if you haven't, basically what they're going to do is give any Wild and Exposed listener 20% off of any think tank bag or any SKB hard case that they have in stock on the website. He said he couldn't do it with special order stuff, but he said that they intentionally overbought that kind of stuff when they did their buying season last year, just because they knew the supply issues were going to be difficult this year. So we should have plenty of stock on plenty of different things. When I was talking to him on the phone, he was actually walking down the aisles because we were trying to come up with a cool promo. And I said, well, I use the Think Tank Airport security bag. And he's like, oh, yeah, it's right here. And so I know they've got that kind of stuff in stock. And that's like a $420 roller bag that is super awesome. I have 3 of them, and I use them different configurations and use them all the time. They fit on a 737 on up. Actually, they'll fit in a little smaller jet too in the overhead compartment, so you know your equipment is safe. But if you look at 20% off of that, it's like $80, a little bit over $80. That's pretty significant little savings on a bag of that caliber. So just know it's got to be in stock, and then it's Wild and Exposed listeners only, and you have to use this promo code. It's CASE2021. So CASE 2021. Use that as the promo code, and you'll get 80% or 20% off, $80 off on a Think Tank Airport security bag, and you'll be set. And I know that here lately, I've been buying the SKB smaller hard cases for like accessory boxes. So like if I'm going on a trip, I have a bunch of these little hard cases that I end up throwing in my checked luggage, and my checked luggage is always duffel bags. So there's no structure to them at all. So if I have something that's somewhat fragile, like GoPros, and they're not like they're fragile, but those guys that are throwing luggage around don't really know what's in there. And if it hits the ground from 10 feet, you want to have it kind of protected. So I use those little SKB hard cases to store just fragile little items that, you want protected, and it fits right in the duffel bag. You put your clothes around it, and it's a good way to go. So keep that in mind for this holiday season.
And speaking of the holiday season, as Mark talked about in the last podcast, make sure you hit up the Wild and Exposed store, so you make sure you get those items shipped to your loved ones or to yourself, and that they'll be received by Christmas.
And you got to go for that It Depends t-shirt. I didn't say it on the last podcast, but I was so going to say it when Mark was talking about, well, I had to use a GoPro or my phone or my video camera or my still camera. That's exactly what our It Depends t-shirt is, so it's perfect for Mark. You should be wearing one 24/7 these days.
Backwards and forwards. It depends. It's amazing. When we talked about this, how many times that comes up now when we're asked questions, just talking, and I never paid attention to it. But now I catch it every time. It's like, oh, there it is again. It depends. Well, of course it depends. There's so many variables. But yes, a great idea by Michael Mauro, and another way for you to support Wild and Exposed and our efforts in bringing you this fun content and all the guests that we have on as well. to share the lively world of wildlife photography, nature photography, because it all depends on what you're doing.
And one other thing we ought to just promote. So we all have favorite pictures, and what we've done is we've taken these favorite pictures of ours. We've hired an artist to turn them into line art, so that this picture that is one of our favorites, our personal favorites, is now going to be turned into line art, which is then going to be going onto T-shirts and hoodies. So I'm excited to get they're not ready yet. I just wanted to kind of preface the whole thing and just let you know that it's coming out and to stay tuned. And I'm sure when we actually get the first batch of those out, we'll put them on Instagram and just try to put the word out. But I think they're going to be I like them. I think they're going to be kind of cool. So maybe we can tease some designs out a little bit at a time until we get these first run of shirts out. But it's going to be different. It's not going to be just your standard logo branded stuff. It's going to be something that's kind of fun, and hopefully we'll have an animal that will resonate with you that you want to wear out and show off.
For those of you listening to the audio podcasts, thanks as always for tuning in. Check us out on YouTube to see the handsome, smiling mugs of Michael, Jason, and Ron. This is part 2.
Are you not smiling?
I will be in a moment. Once I start
Are
storytelling.
Are you closing the show already?
Thank you.
Quick trip to Newfoundland.
Thank you for hearing about my adventure to Newfoundland. Quick tip in closing: go for the fresh cod dinners every chance you get. That's it, man. That's all you need to know, people.
You can't get that in Wyoming.
So good. So good. Like, almost, you just want to have it every night, but you don't want to be repetitive. But it's like, how long will we be here? It's so good. That is Newfoundland.
The fresh sea air.
It's part of it. It's just, the air is splendid there. It's just so clean. I mean,
if you guys have been watching any of Mark's posts on Instagram, you've posted a couple of those images that represent the ocean.
Yeah, and there's a lot more coming.
So there's a lot of teaser things out there if you want to check it out.
The content,
or a few right now.
Yeah, they're on my Instagram, but they'll be flooding Wild and Exposed to share with the other guys' stuff as well on there too. So
did you put your card holder in your backpack?
Yes, or in my chest pocket of my jacket. Mind
you only could wade up to your waist?
It's a different situation there. I wasn't really as keen to go wading into the Atlantic Ocean in the north. It could
slightly
happen.
Cooler,
a lot cooler. But a couple of highlight stories from this trip that will be revealed in the minutes ahead involved the ocean.
Now, hold on. Before you get started with the highlights that are going to involve the ocean, were you able to photograph moose at all?
Are you making fun of me now? Yes, totally. It's Newfoundland. There are lots of moose in Newfoundland.
No, I just knew where most of the highlights were going to come from. So,
the moose population, it's world renowned for moose in Newfoundland, but there aren't as many as there used to be. It's a very different landscape for moose than it was 10 or 15 years ago. My first trip to Newfoundland was in 2002. I fell in love with the place then for a long list of reasons, and the moose were everywhere. The joke was the Newfoundland speed bump, which isn't funny because they were such a high risk at that time. At night you just avoided driving or you drove very slowly because moose are black, and so is the night. They disappear. They're so hard to see until they're right too close. But the province has removed a significant number since then. This is hearsay. I don't have it, but I believe it to be true that there was a class action lawsuit threatened against the province. I could be wrong about this, but this is what's happened from my understanding, because moose are technically introduced to Newfoundland, and we're very successful. It's ideal moose habitat, but because of the automotive collisions and the very unfortunate circumstance of people perishing when they hit moose, which makes sense. It can happen. They're monstrous big animals. Then, because they were introduced, there was a threat of a class action lawsuit against the province. And from what I heard, they upped the quotas and stuff to remove moose so that there aren't nearly as many along roadways. And in fact, we were one of the gentlemen we got to know on our trip this year in Newfoundland was a biologist working there who was doing a survey on spruce budworm. And not that I believe they have it there, but they're just doing constant surveys watching for it because they don't want it to get established, and they're doing some spraying and stuff to prevent it. Commented that 10 years ago he would have seen 30 moose on the drive, and this year he hadn't seen any going back and forth. I mean, that was like per drive kind of thing. So the moose landscape is different than it used to be. However, in summary, I mean, the happy ending is there are still a lot of moose in Newfoundland. They're just not around every corner as they used to be. It's a matter of...
So back up a minute. What
Sure.
was that bug? Is that a bug?
Spruce budworm? Yeah.
Yeah. Is that something that affects moose, or does it affect the habitat?
No, it's trees. It's not to do with moose, right? It's to do with the forest. It kills the forest. So that's one of the culprits of what's, I believe, happened on the west, where you have all these coniferous forests that are dying, and therefore once they've died, for the forest industry, obviously there's no value in the lumber, but not more importantly, also a big issue is that when the forests have expansive die-off, there's a lot of dead timber there, and lightning strikes can happen and cause these extensive forest fires that are happening in the west and the Rockies, all through those regions that have been struck. And they're as far north as Alaska that this has been happening, as far as the lodgepole pine beetles and stuff. So it's more of a concern of watching for these species showing up that can devastate the forest landscape. That's what he was doing. So they were drilling.
And he was just out there a lot, so he was just saying he isn't seeing as many moose just because he normally would. What he's studying was more about habitat.
Exactly.
I just didn't follow it right away.
Sorry, yeah. He lived far enough away in Newfoundland that he was in the field for 2 weeks in the region we were in, and he was staying in the same accommodations that we were in. But yeah, he was assessing the forest situation and whether any of these were there, not the moose, but just commenting on the side because he knew we were wildlife photographers and we were looking for moose among other things. He just had brought that up as an anecdotal story that way. So yeah, Newfoundland, is synonymous with thinking about finding moose. They're still there. It's just more effort than it used to be to find them. But we did.
Two things.
So-
What about ticks? Because ticks are a bad problem in Maine.
That as well. Maine, they said that recruitment, a good year of recruitment is about 30% anyway, and that's just from predation. But in Maine, they were having 50% loss just from ticks, and they were taking about 40 pounds of ticks off of these moose calves that had been overcome with these ticks. Is that a problem in Newfoundland as well, or have they?
It's not a happy story, guys. This podcast is
it's
such a great trip. Talking about 40 pounds of ticks on an animal. Everybody in the audience, I mean, it's an important topic. You're right to bring it up, but everybody's cringing. The moose ticks are a big deal because they overwinter on the animal and reproduce on the animal. And it's a spring phenomenon. If the winter season's prolonged, can cause hypothermia because more and more ticks are on the moose. They'll rub against trees because of the irritation, which removes hair, and they no longer can insulate themselves and die of hypothermia. So a big thing is, as these moose tick numbers or these tick numbers increase on the animal, is if spring comes early enough, they can get through it. But if it doesn't, then they have these huge rates of mortality. There are wood ticks in Newfoundland. There are, to my knowledge, no black-legged ticks, which is what causes Lyme disease. That's something that is on a lot of people's radar as it moves further and further north with warming climates and changing ecosystems. But that's one of the, honestly, from I do a lot of white-tailed deer photography, amongst other things, of course. In Ontario, it's where I live a lot of the year, and the black-legged ticks are an ongoing nightmare. I mean, I've 5 or 6 a day I've had on me this week. Not on my skin, but I have to wear coveralls so I can see them, like these pale gray coveralls. And I treat those now, and I don't want to do that either. But the safety of having, an afternoon of wearing these coveralls, not against my skin, that are treated, versus the risk of ticks and the threat of Lyme disease, it's not fun, but it's something to be very aware of. And it's a different topic. Sorry for getting off track. But in Newfoundland, it's wonderfully refreshing, like Alaska, or the Yukon, where we can hike wherever and not be worried about these parasites that can be vectors for disease. As far as the moose and moose tick issues and hypothermia, I have not heard that being an issue in Newfoundland. I know in Ontario, Algonquin Park, it can be a very significant issue, again, depending on what the spring climate's like, the weather for that year. And thankfully, the last few years have been better for Algonquin populations that way. But in Newfoundland, I haven't heard that being an issue, nor seen evidence of that having an impact.
Well, that's good.
So occasionally on Instagram, you'll be scrolling through and you'll see a white moose. Right, so you'll see there's a couple of famous ones. You'll see a white moose crossing the road. And I believe a lot of those are found in Newfoundland. I know there's some in Alaska too at times. It hasn't been for a while that anybody's seen one. But did you hear any scuttlebutt about any white moose, or is that something that's just, it's like winning the lottery to see one?
I think so. So there's a white cow and calf that's been seen in northern Ontario, above Lake Superior, along that highway. That's one of the viral ones that you see crossing the road. But Newfoundland does have a few white moose that pop up, and I've always been intrigued by that. I always ask questions, and man, that would be one of those crazy moments to see that. And we covered a lot of Newfoundland on this trip because we were there for a month. And in one area, I have some good friends, and one of them saw a white bull this summer, and it was like, and I think we have to cover Newfoundland because I'm sorry, I kind of insist upon it because there's so many good stories from our trips for the podcast sake. But if you go back 1 or 2 years to other Newfoundland podcasts we've done, I think we had a video link, or maybe we didn't put it up. If we didn't, we can do it for this one, where there are 2 lovely Newfoundland ladies talking about the white moose in the pond. And, would you look at that, my dearie? Would you see that? Right? Oh, it's amazing. It's so entertaining and so wonderfully genuine. There are pockets of them, and they seem to show up. It is illegal to harvest a white moose in Newfoundland, and I learned that this year just by reading online. But I haven't seen one. But they're there. There are pockets. So you look online, you can do some digging, you can find out kind of where they are, but it's literally a needle in a haystack. Newfoundland is an incredible landscape for so many reasons, so rugged, so it's very unique for where I've been. But it's also, a lot of it's heavily forested with conifers. I mean, you look at the forest and it's like, there's no way you can walk through it. But the point in saying that is it's so hard to see these moose in some areas. You have to be really lucky to find a white one. But they're there, and that would be a dream. Man, yeah, that'll push the R5 buffer when that happens.
Yeah, it would be totally cool to just capture a white. I mean, I've seen footage of a bull, and I've seen footage of a cow and a calf, and then probably some other cows out there, but it would just be spectacular to see a big, majestic bull that's all white.
I mean, it's one of those things that even after decades of doing this, to keep our stuff together, to get the content we want, not just be dumbfounded staring at it. That's where I'd be like, oh my, get this, but it's be so amazing, so rare. And it's maybe someday.
All right, so now on with your story. Those were just my 2 little things, and I was just curious.
Good questions. On with my story. Well, I mean,
Well, hold on, one more.
yeah, throw it out there.
Nope. Michael, he insists on covering Newfoundland.
Well, it is Newfoundland. How big is Newfoundland? So when you talk Newfoundland, are you talking? Give us a reference. Is it as big as Colorado? Is it half the size of Ontario? What are we talking?
Well, it's about 10 or 12 hours to drive across it. And I'm asking the Google brain right now because I wasn't prepped for that question, my friend.
No, I could have done that too. I just thought you might have it.
Not that this will help some listeners. It's 405,000 square kilometers. Okay, what state is the same size as Newfoundland? This comes up. Newfoundland Labrador would rank as the fourth size behind Alaska, Texas, and California.
Perfect. That's good to know.
How big is the island of Newfoundland? So it's the way that Canadian geography works is Newfoundland and Labrador. So Labrador is across the Gulf of the St. Lawrence above Quebec. There's a magical place that's on my bucket list that came up with a guest not too long ago. Torngat Mountains in Labrador. Looks like a stunning place to go spend a couple of weeks. So it's Newfoundland and Labrador, but Newfoundland itself, the island, if you want to call it that, it's very big. I mean, Australia is considered an island. Newfoundland's not as big as Australia, but the island itself is 108,000 square kilometers.
I just wanted some sort of reference.
Yeah, it's great.
When you're talking about these little escapades and looking for the stuff you're looking for, how much you were having to travel, or how much if you spend a month there, you would think you could cover quite a bit of ground.
Well, you find your sweet spots, so you don't cover a lot of ground. But I did cover a significant portion. I'll describe. But Newfoundland and Labrador is 24 times larger than Hawaii. It's another comparison. So
I have no idea
so if that helps.
how big Hawaii is.
Well, someday we have to go there and film, and we'll get a perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm in.
there's some pretty cool things happening there too. That would be of interest for us.
Yeah, Jason will be our tour guide there.
So it's about, what did you say, square kilometers?
108,000 square kilometers, the island itself. So just Newfoundland, not counting mainland Labrador. So you're doing the
So
math.
it's a little under half as big as Wyoming. Just Newfoundland. Wyoming's 253,000
Okay.
square kilometers. So
There you go.
it's a solid sized island.
Yeah, I mean, I've driven across from coast to coast on one occasion when an airline I flew with about 15 years ago went out of business while we were there and didn't know about it. But it was a great trip because of it. We ended up in St. John's for a couple of days, and we didn't expect that.
Hold on for a second.
Yeah.
I think I got lost in that. The airline didn't know that they had gone out of business.
No, the airline went out of business, and my buddy and I were on this wildlife photography trip, staying in a remote cabin with no connection to anything. And when we came out, it was
You
like,
didn't know
your
about
airline
the
no
airlines.
longer
Yeah.
it's gone. So we had to book flights on a new airline, and because we were out of connection for like 3 or 4 days, everything on that side of Newfoundland was booked because it was very limited. So we had to drive across to St. John's, the largest city in Newfoundland, and book a flight out of there. But for those of you who go to Newfoundland, St. John's is a super cool, unique city. It's like a small northern San Francisco, in a sense. It's on a hill. I mean, you can Google all this stuff and see images. Signal Hill's there, where the first telephone call was made through to Europe. There's a landmark there. And it's a small little bay, but it's just a beautiful, picturesque town. And I was a little bit of a younger man. There's a lot of fun to be had in St. John's. There's a street that's closed off that's just pubs, George Street. And we landed there. Again, this is probably 15 years ago, my buddy and I, because of the circumstances. And it was also the University Frosh Week, so there were these open concerts, and it was just lots happening. A buzzing city, but a beautiful city, worth seeing if you go to Newfoundland. but like 10 hours across to go from one side of the island to the other. But we cover all different areas. On this trip, we were in the southernmost areas of Newfoundland all the way to the north. We covered a lot of mileage that way, and a lot of variety in topography. The fjords and I can't call them mountains because it's not like Alaska or Alberta or the Yukon where you have snow-capped mountains year-round, but the fjords remind one of Norway, and it's just such a. In the north, there's a lot more bogs, tamarack or larch trees in the evergreens, which are the only conifers that shed their needles every year. But what's cool about that is they turn like this yellowish gold, and as wildlife photographers, that's golden. It's just beautiful to set in the background for any of these scenes. And there's a lot of barren rock in the north. I mean, just strikingly rugged seaside landscape. But people are living there and flourishing in these little tiny coastal towns. You'll see this if you go on Newfoundland Labrador tourism and look at any of their advertisements. They do one of the best jobs promoting this area I've seen anywhere in the world. The quality of ads they put out, but they all brightly colored homes or fishing shacks, and the stories that could be told living in this landscape. And then further south, there's actually now some more deciduous trees showing up. There's red maples and there's birch and stuff in there as well. So for October in the southern part of Newfoundland, it's very, very colorful with the reds. But the north, you just have the larch or tamarack trees turning that way. But we went as far up as the Viking village, and it was fun because it's closed that time of year. So we just go check out. The village itself is open. Anybody can walk around there. But people, it's just amazing to think of the lifestyles of people that live there on this harsh, windswept, cold, but so beautiful landscape. You know, when the sun is out and the sea life. When we were in coastal areas, it was rare not to see whales and dolphins just going by. There's so much going on. We talked to a local who had a sunfish in the bay a couple days before. I talked to a guy who would go out off the point where he lived, and he would drop little pieces of fish off his boat, and this tuna that was like, I don't know, looked like 7 feet long would come up and just out of the depths and snack on this and just disappear like it's just a stealthy bullet under the surface. It's just
like I got to go back to the sunfish. Sorry.
Okay.
The sunfish, like the big
flat,
big, huge, ugly, gliding. Yeah.
Yeah, but such a unique.
I thought they were in warmer water. That's crazy.
Apparently, last year was a peak year for whales in Newfoundland. You know, and there's guesswork as to why that's happening, but you know the ocean currents are warming and changing somewhat, and some of the. So yeah, the humpback count was off the charts last year, but we saw a lot of whales, and it's just such wonder to be 1 minute in the forest with moose or caribou, and then with the binoculars glassing out and watching whales and hearing them. Most days in Newfoundland are windy, right? It's gusty winds. There are days you cannot film video. I thought about it, and you just don't take it out. I mean, as Michael's pointed out to us on many occasions, just the camera catching the wind. I mean, I suppose you could get clips, but really, it could be crazy wind. But when it's still, you can be so far away and still hear the whales as they surface along the shore. It's just magical. Beautiful place. And very unique. And the pace, right? It's one of these things, for years and years I have embraced and thrive in the adrenaline-filled pace of modern business. But it's also, I don't know, something more natural about slowing it down. And it's funny on these trips with meeting the local people. Everybody is so friendly in these remote rural areas, small town Newfoundland. But I get up, and I'll tell you the stories of the daily routine in a moment, but it's like there's an agenda, right? I've got so many days. I've got to go find moose or caribou, and try to create content, whatever it might be. And a local might be coming along that morning and see me and then stop to talk. And I'm like, brother, I can't talk. I go do this. And he's, but they taught me. There was one gentleman I talked to. It was a beautiful daybreak. The sun's just cresting the horizon. I'm on this remote road, and this guy comes along in his SUV and pulls up beside me. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing? You're looking for a moose?" I'm like, "Well, yes, sure." Beautiful frost, starting to get, the little crystals as the sun's hitting the frost. And I'm like, "I don't see any moose here. I got to go find them." And he starts talking to me and telling me about him and about his family. And he said, something, in Newfoundland here, we know everybody. We might go into the store and we might know 10 people. And, we have time to have a yarn with all of them. And it was interesting. He's like, okay. Well, light is time sensitive as a wildlife photographer, so I felt a little rushed. But I did spend 20 minutes with the guy. And he'd been a fisherman his whole life. And he'd go to sea for 3 days and 2 nights and then come back. And it was seasonal. He told me this story. But when he finished the conversation, he said, "Well, let me tell you something. When you go through life, if I was going to say something, I didn't ask for any of this, right? I'm just listening to the guy. When you go through life, think about things." And he said, "Let me tell you just before I go, I know you should get going. You're probably getting cold standing there." He said, "Don't make other people's problems your own. Lots of people out there have lots of issues and they get upset about things. Don't make those your problems. You just let them wash over you and you go forward." I'm like, what a gift, right? I took 20 minutes to listen to this gentleman, retired guy, about his life, about small town Newfoundland. I felt rushed because I'm like, the light's going to get harsher. I still might have to hike 2 or 3 kilometers to find what I'm looking for. But at the end, that was the reward of the morning. That's what Newfoundland culture is like. It's just slower, and there's a lot more care and compassion, a lot more giving. So that's one of the reasons I go back every year. And to be truthful, would like a seasonal home there too. But I won't talk about that on the podcast. So these days in Newfoundland, depending on where we were, it's more of an open landscape than what we have here in deciduous forests. And so we can see further, like you would in the north, in Alaska and the Yukon. And because of that, it gives the opportunity for one of my favorite photographic still photography images are silhouettes. Now, silhouettes don't sell like crazy. There are magazines I've worked with for decades who don't want to touch them. I have other magazines that certainly fit them in. I think they tell a cool story because they're so visually dramatic. But we would start out each day before sunrise trying to find that, and stay sometimes till well out on the tundra, well after dark, working it when we were with animals. We would try for moose in the mornings for silhouettes, and in the evenings we were usually with a herd of caribou. And if it was clear, or if there's just a few clouds to give attitude to the sky, then we'd stay. But what's amazing about photography when doing silhouettes, and actually I'll give a shout out to my friend Don Kessler in Alberta. Years ago, he and I were in a place, just the two of us together, and there's a silhouette opportunity. And I'd done silhouettes before and just probably haphazardly had them work. And he's like, when we were doing it, it was a mule deer at that time. He's like, "Dial it way down, underexposed, way down, like 1, 2 stops, go." So I'm like, all right. And what you look at with your naked eye as the sun has set, or when it's setting, but even like 15 minutes after it's set, doesn't look as dramatic as when you dial underexposed by a stop or 2 stops. Just bracket away and do it, and you'll be amazed at how red and how much vibrancy comes through in that situation. So I just love doing that. And then the R5, one of the first nights, I'm like laying on the ground with this herd of caribou in the dark, trying to get low enough so I can see not just their head, but below the belly and legs to complete the silhouette for what I was looking for. And hand holding it, trying to do video. and manually dialing it darker and lighter and darker. Man, it was so much fun, but a challenge. I have yet to edit those. I'm looking forward to it, but we had a lot of fun. And the iPhone will do it even. I did some with that where you just touch your subject, but of course every time you record it resets automatically. So you touch your subject so it's in focus, and then slide that little the sun down a bit until it's the darkness you want. But be wary because it goes further for a second than what your finger does. So there are times I made it too dark. But I've got some fantastic iPhone clips of the caribou silhouetted walking by just on the phone. So that's one of my favorite things, at beginning and end of a day in that kind of landscape where you have the horizon to play with.
We want to see them.
Yeah, There's one. I've got a. Yeah. Anyway, it was so much fun. I got one. I think there were 6 moose, but I got 4 in the frame on a silhouette one morning. All right, so the silhouettes again aren't for everybody, but I love what they do, and complete a story. So if you're doing a project, an article, a photo essay, it's such a different image to throw in the mix than traditional. Nobody. Okay. I don't want to monopolize the whole thing here, so I can keep going. I just am feeling badly because I'm telling stories nonstop. So the caribou in Newfoundland are woodland caribou. So they're a bit heavier bodied than barren ground, and their antlers, all caribou certainly are similar when you look at them, and probably the average person wouldn't know the difference between them glancing at them. But those who are invested in identifying animals would know the difference. And antlers are a little different, but they still have, a mature stag or bull will have the double brow wedge or tines, and then they have the second ones coming up, sweep out like the palm of your hands and fingers. Those are called bez. And then you have the sweeping upper part of the antlers as well. And just like every other cervid or ungulate antlered animal, Cervidae is a family in Latin, they are all unique. No two are alike. I mean, I've never seen 2 that are exact mirrors of one another. And then it's so interesting to follow year after year and see how some animals change and mature or age. The caribou have one of the most intricate and, to me, just majestic antler formations. And woodland caribou are what are in Newfoundland. And they're hard to find in some areas. Their population has crashed in the past. Since probably the 90s. In the I think it's the mid to late 80s. A group of coyotes came across from Nova Scotia on an ice bridge. The only predators for caribou on the island of Newfoundland prior to that were black bears. So the coyotes have populated the island in the years and decades since, and at one point were having a really serious effect on mortality of calves. There was no recruitment or growth of a population with calves for quite a few years. And so I think part of it is caribou cows, or does as they call them in Newfoundland, aren't as protective as moose are of their calves, and it's just so heavily forested as well that, and coyotes, as everybody knows, they're very cunning and very intelligent predators. So that's had a big impact on the population. So it's a little more effort to find them, but I do believe in the last few years, for reasons I'm currently unaware of, but will hopefully soon research more, they're recovering in areas a bit more. So we had, for instance, there aren't as many calves or prickets, as they call them in Newfoundland, as one would expect. In the herd, one of the herds we spent time with, there were 17 animals in the area, and there were 3 calves. And of that, there were probably 8 or 9 females, if not more. So there should be more, but again, between black bears and coyotes is happening. But it's great to see the three even, and over the years we've been going, we've been noticing more and more calves. So that's a good sign. But
did you see any coyotes or black bears?
I've seen black bears, coyotes, no, surprisingly. But I know locals have and have pictures of them, and some of them have trail cameras out and get them. There are more lynx there than I realized, and I didn't see one. I'm looking forward to that opportunity someday. But I saw a sign of coyotes, but didn't actually see any. Foxes in Newfoundland, not that it has to do with predation on caribou, they don't, but we had a magical experience with a fox this year, and they're around in areas too if you get lucky. But the caribou, as everybody knows, I mean, they're not necessarily where you expect to find them day in and day out. They move around, and it's fun spending as much time as we did. So to be there for the month, and they just get a notion sometimes. It's just like the lead cow gets a notion. Well, we're going to go for a hike for 5 kilometers today and go to this other spot because it's really cool. And all of a sudden they just go. They're gone. So it's always a roll of the dice to start each day in different areas we're in. Once we found a herd and they were approachable, that where they'd be and how we'd find them. So each day to locate them, we'd hope to get them right away in the morning, to get the good light, to get silhouettes maybe, or at least just a good light. And there were times we'd get out there even for half hour before sunrise and no sign of them, didn't find them. We'd have to hike for a few kilometers and find them mid-morning. And then there's that, you pack stuff so you can spend the day, because more than one time, we decided to hike back out and go back in 3 hours later, and guess what? Nobody's there. So it's a fun game that way. So you have to be prepared to spend the time with them. And it was a great workout because of the amount of hiking that we did to ensure we found them each day when the weather was good. But then there's that part of Newfoundland too where we stayed longer. We added an extra week at the end because of the favorable forecast to have sunny days and calmer days. But there were times where it would start out just sunny and beautiful, and then by 10 a.m. this fog rolls in off the ocean, and you're just in this soupy fog, which was dramatic in its own way for video and photos. But there were times you couldn't see far enough, but then it would lift a bit, and they'd bed down, and just, it was very, very moody and fun. So there's that part of being a wildlife photographer. I mean, you can work with different parts of the landscape, but the different weather and different light. But the biggest daily challenge was just basically finding the subjects and then hopefully staying with them. Newfoundland's its own landscape that way, because there's a lot of extensive bogs, which are not safe for people to walk across. But when you personally, if I watch them walk their game trail, their years worn path around the edges, I can carefully walk that too. But there's also a lot of solid ground, exposed rock, especially closer to the coast, that there's no issue with that. I told my favorite story about this Newfoundland trip on a recent year-end wrap-up podcast we recorded for Nampa. So I'll give a shorter version of it, but just to give the flavor of what the best, well, for me and my interests and my passions, the best day in Newfoundland was for this trip. We started out before daybreak, as we did every day that was clear. Sorry, I'm just going to have a drink of water. And found moose along the shore. And there were 6, but we were able to get, I think, 4 in a silhouette. And at first I'm like zoomed right in, and the moose were flighty. They didn't want to be around people. You kind of have to hide and be in a place, but there were enough moose in the area that if you hid long enough at the right time of day, they'd come by. And I got 4 in the frame, but at first I just put them against the water silhouetted, which was all right. But when I panned back for an environmental portrait, there were these rolling hills behind that gave layers and context to the image as well. So that was pretty cool. Still before sunrise. And to our shock, we saw this fox moving along near us from one bush to another. Tuckamore. It's a evergreen plant slash tree that is just incredibly dense with branches, and all the animals navigate around Tuckamore. And the fox was hunting, but it was a cross fox, which are quite a few of in Newfoundland and throughout the north, and it's a color morph of a red fox that has black coat as well as the red throughout it. So very striking animal. But it's dark. It's like half an hour, 20 minutes at least to sunrise. So no expectation. I'd seen a couple other foxes on the trip at that point, but each time it was like literally a blur, just flat out running away as we hiked the edge of the tundra. This one stuck around. It laid down. It'd go behind another tuckamore about 10 yards further, lay down, look around, and it was totally chill. So it worked. Most of the pictures were taken before sunrise, but then I got a couple as the sun hit it as well. And then as soon as the sun hit it, it was gone. It took off. So that was magical to have that. And to be able to like photograph the fox and then like pivot 90 degrees and do moose silhouette and then back to the fox and waiting for the light. It's just so much going on. But the caribou were nowhere in sight. And so sometimes Pilly and I would split up. She got to know this area well enough, and for the most part there's cell signal at this spot. And we'd split up to try to find the caribou. And part of my dream, my bucket list, top of the list caribou picture I was trying to get, what I didn't expect to get, was swimming in good light. And caribou love to swim. They don't hesitate to cross any body of water if their mind's set on getting to the other side. But I'd never had that opportunity. And just for the diversity of my portfolio, dreamt of it. So maybe 3 or 4 days before this special day, I had my first chance filming caribou in the water. And a group of them, about a dozen, swam directly at me. There was this bay they crossed instead of going around. And there was a big stag and a whole bunch of females and young, and they came straight at me. But it was cloudy. And so it was super exciting, but not as dramatic an image, because cloudy conditions make the water gray. Still okay, but not what we dream of. So on the day I'm talking about with the moose silhouettes and the cross fox, Pilly and I split up, and she went in another area about 3 or 4 kilometers from where I was. And I started hiking through the edge of this forest and along the edge of the tundra. And I got maybe a kilometer or 2 in, and I got a text from her that she found the caribou herd we were looking for. And they were near another bay. And it was a sunny day. And they're heading toward the water. And so I'm like, panic mode. I'm like, there's no way I can get there. And I can't go back around the way I entered. It just take way too long. So I have all my gear on me. I have my backpack with the cameras. And so I start high-stepping it, going as quickly as I can, knowing I've got a long way to go. It might not work good. I'll just do my best to get there. About another half mile along, I'm along the edge of the coast, and there's this ptarmigan just standing there as I'm walking by. I mean, I almost step on it because I have such a focus to get to the caribou. It's like 10 feet from me. I'm like, oh, beautiful, mid-molt, beautiful plumage, ocean background, got to do this. Caribou, please wait. So I spent 10 minutes with the ptarmigan. I had so much fun with it, and then went on for the caribou. I got to this high point where I should be able to see all around. There's some forest, but see the caribou. Didn't see anything. Couldn't see the caribou, couldn't see Pilly. I'm like, oh, I've missed it. And at that point, there's no cell signal. For whatever reason, it's gone. So I just keep going. And another half mile or so, I glimpse 2 caribou briefly on a hill, and they turn and are walking away. And I know at this point they're within a couple hundred yards of this bay. So I push it, go. I get there, I get past them, I see the caribou, I get on the other side, I meet up with Pilly, and we didn't pick up on this point. So we're watching, it's a rocky shore along this bay, but there's places they can access the water. We missed this one. And we go to the next one, 200 yards down, get set up. This is where they're going to come down. And I look up, and they're in the water. They're swimming because we missed the entry point. But they're close enough that when I walk down the water and I zoom, I can get the shots I want. And they literally entered the water less than 10 minutes after I got there and swam this bay, the whole straight line of them. And the water's blue, the light is bright, the big stag's at the back, his antlers above the water. The water has some wave to it, which is kind of cool because and this is one of those things I wish we could have been doing video too. It's just so fast. But it was timing it, so I literally was filling the buffer because I was timing it where the wave would go down and then you'd see the stag's body come up and get a backline in the blue water as well as his head. So that was the culmination of that day, which made it an epic experience and was able to film that behavior in the light I dreamt about for years.
So was that all R5 days then, or you're back to shooting the R5, or are you shooting the 850?
Those stills were on the 850. So on that trip, I was using the R5 for primarily video. I was doing handheld video at first, and then I was doing everything on the tripod after that. Not that I didn't think it'd be possible to get some really cool behavior handheld. I haven't played with it enough, and I want to review the video. But after the first day or two of trying handheld, I'm confident there are some clips that are good. But I wanted more than just some short clips. I wanted to be able to pan with the herd. I wanted a still composition as far as the frame not moving at all as the herd came through. So everything, not everything, but the majority of the R5 was for video. I'd switch back and forth. And I'm looking forward to doing trips where it's simply toggling. I mean, I've got the action buttons on it programmed just to switch the mode from video to still and be able to do that. But the 850 is such an extension of me. When I decided I was just doing stills, it's what I grabbed first at that point.
So you were filling the buffer on the 850.
That's right.
Yeah, when Jason and I were in Yellowstone last winter and we got to film the pine marten chasing the squirrel, I was even rested on a snow machine and had what I thought was a pretty solid rest, and you still couldn't get usable video handheld. And that was only, I think, at about 300 millimeter. But yeah, even it's really difficult. What's that?
Was that the 850? You mean?
No, that was the R5.
Oh, it was the R5. Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Operator error. I mean, no, that was.
I only say one thing in the last hour and a half, and I'm getting crap about it.
I thought we were gonna talk about the snowbank saddle again, but
no, that didn't come up. Thanks, though.
Well, I think it'll pull off for some. And Joe Sobolewski, who was on the podcast, a great friend of the podcast, he sent me some stuff which convinced me to go to the R5. He posted on Instagram in the summertime. I think it'll do some. I just haven't done it.
Yeah, you can get 1 second clip here and there, but to be able to hold it steady enough is difficult. And it was not operator error. It was, well, all right, it may have been on that one because I was trying to follow the action of the two fastest moving things on the tree.
Well, you have to train yourself, right? When you're doing video and things are moving, it's hard not to move just instinctively with them. to keep that camera still so that the movement's highlighted, not the movement of the frame. I mean, I found that to be a challenge. It's like the animal lifts its head. Well, don't lift that camera. Let the animal lift its head, right? So I could see that being with two fast moving, like a pine marten and a squirrel. That would be hard not to. You know, I'm sure the first 10 seconds I'd be all over the place and be like, okay, gotta stay still. But
Well, thanks for waking up for that, Jason.
well, hold on.
Hey, wait! I've been talking the whole time. I've just been on mute.
None of the audience are asleep. How are any of the hosts asleep?
No, he's just been muted the whole time.
So another.
No, I've been intrigued by Mark's stories. Seriously, they've been to hear that story about that last shot, the one you've been trying to get for so long. You know, I think that's so cool to have all that come together finally, and shot that you've envisioned for so long. I mean, that's I think most of us know how that feels. It's very, very exciting. And it's a cool story.
Thank you. And to earn it, right?
And was it only once that it happened? But
yes.
Once it happened, did you get it again and again?
No, that was it.
Really?
Yeah, that was it.
I
think if we had
said
months
in a
more.
previous conversation with this one, that bull has given you everything else. Why not get the ocean shot? It was great.
This is the third. I missed 2020 due to COVID, but it's the third year I've photographed that bull, and he's a treat. And this year was more dramatic because there were two competitive bulls or stags around, and then there was also an adolescent that hung around with the herd. So by spending a month with them, sorry, Ron just vanished on us for a second there. That was my face. By spending a month, I was able to witness so much behavior and photograph and film it. So that was a real treat as a biologist and as somebody who loves caribou, just to get that right through mating season. So lots of mating sequences, lots of sparring, lots of satellite bull stuff, lots of sleeping, lots of mother and young. It was a real treat. And I'll put up some video, but it's something that's really cool and unique about caribou is they click as they walk. There's in their hooves, there's the bones that click. There's always this clicking going on around. And biologists believe that this is due for in inclement weather, whether it's super foggy or in really snowy conditions, that they can hear one another and stay together as a group as they walk. So something unique, and you get used to it. But watching some of the video, the audio of that is very apparent too. But it was a tremendous privilege to be there right from pre-rut through rut, through the end of it, and then to see the stags. It happened over about 2 or 3 days, where the stag who had the harem of females would not tolerate another mature male around, and as the rut wound up, he let them come back in, and they joined the group, and he'd even spar with them again. Within that time, 2 or 3 days, the last female was out of heat, and then he'd spar with these other ones, which, you know what, when we were filming it, and this was the joy of video, I mean, got lots of stills as well, but the adolescent bull, the 3-year-old bull, would come over and spar with one of these satellite big guys. It's like, oh, this is so great to get this footage and these photos. But when and then like an hour later, the two big guys got together. I'm like, this is really happening? Like 3 days ago, he would try to kill the other one, and they actually sparred, and that was magical to film and to witness. Another anecdotal story that's fun about the rut cycle, and I'm sure this happens with all ungulates, but to witness it over calmly and quietly over these days. I mean, there's nobody there but us, and it was to watch the females come into estrus or into heat was very gradual. You know, you think about it, I don't often get the chance. They're either not in heat and not being pursued by a male, or they come into their annual heat and the male's right there. Well, these females, when they're coming into heat, the caribou, it took about 5 days, and they'd get friendlier and friendlier with the bull each day, and friskier with them, like to the point where they'd come up and poke him with their antlers, or they'd just tickle the top of his antlers with theirs, or they'd rub the side of their head up against his flank or his neck, or poke him in some places that I won't mention with their antlers. Climb on his back as they got closer and closer to peak heat, just to watch that slowly progress over 3 or 4 or 5 days. And by the 4th or 5th day, they had that bull's full attention because they were in heat at that point. But at first they weren't. But to see their affection and friskiness grow and increase each day with the stag, and he's always gentle with them, which is something to see too. Like sometimes he'd be irritated where they'd poke their antlers, their little antlers. And caribou are the only antlered animal where the females also grow antlers annually, albeit a fraction the size of a mature stag. But he would be so gentle with them. But on a couple occasions, there were 2 females in heat the same day, and just like any other species, the dominant one would get more of the bull's attention. But it was something really wonderful about having the time just to observe and witness that slow change in behavior that only happens once a year, unless they're not bred and come into heat again a month later, which would be rare in this situation. Slowly become friendlier and friendlier and more affectionate with the stag. It was wonderful to watch.
I witnessed the same exact thing with moose. So, how we talk about go out and spend 10 days with, on your trip. But if you do get that chance to spend 30 days or whatever, that's the kind of stuff that you start noticing. And that's the stuff that you get to witness. And it's you could have just exactly what you just said could have been moose. It's the same thing. It's just this gradual kind of the nudging and you would think, okay, well, she's over here and she's really loving on you, it's time. And he just knows, no, it's not time. But this is part of the process. It's just every day it just gets a little bit more affectionate or a little bit more. It's just a really cool thing to watch. And you can knowing that you can get the quality video or the quality stills because of that.
Yep. Yeah, it's the same with elk too. I've had that. I've not seen it with moose, but I've seen it with elk for sure, almost word for word. It's pretty cool.
It's kind of the wildlife equivalent of going from, hey, how you doing, to how you doing.
That should be a Far Side cartoon.
Yeah.
Probably has been.
I see another
I was
t-shirt.
just going to say, it's a future t-shirt. Is it front?
How you
Is
doing?
it front and back visuals, or are they both on the front, just side by side?
We can play with it.
Go front and back.
Yeah, all right. Ron's front and back. All right. In summary, it was just a tremendous privilege to have that time with them this year, and I love Newfoundland for just the unique flavor of the landscape and the wildlife. And there's so much to be. There's so many shorebirds, eagles, other things, puffins. Not when we were there, but it is a great place to go and see puffins during this, I guess, spring and summer. I haven't really focused on them, but there are hot spots along the coast where they nest.
Yeah, hearing you talk about it, Mark, makes me just want to get up there even more. I've got to get up there.
Well, I was thinking Mark should probably be a spokesperson for the tourism board.
Newfoundland Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
I have worked with them for a lot of years too, but it's because I don't know, there's something about, when you think about the rhythm of caribou in the north, there's something about the rhythm of Newfoundland. And maybe not everybody's going to get that, everybody's going to vibe with it. Maybe there's different types of people, but there's something about that place that just brings it down a notch and makes it more sane, but still tremendously rugged and wild. I guess that if I was to summarize it, that's how I feel about it. And the people are fantastic. I've met just some really wonderful people who to this day keep in touch with me on a regular basis. It's a great place. On one of the trips, probably 15 years ago, we went in the summertime, and Billy and I, we took the kids, and we'd rented a cabin on the ocean, and we told one of the housekeepers of this cabin complex that we hadn't had fresh salmon or something. I think that's what it was. I mean, it was salmon, but I think we hadn't had a fresh caught salmon. It was like 2 hours later, she showed up at the cabin door with this big salmon. She's like, "Here, do it." And it's like, it's just phenomenal. Just no prompting. This is the opportunity, and even on this trip, like I just mentioned, I mean, there's so many people that when you take the time to listen to, it was worth it. Perspective, we rush, produce, earn, pay bills. We love what we do. We're privileged, and anybody who has the opportunity to seriously, whether amateur or professional, whatever it might be, to pursue the interest and passion of wildlife photography is a privilege, and this helps keep it. I think, what am I trying to summarize? It keeps it in perspective that to slow it down this way, it doesn't have to be, shouldn't be, an anxiety-producing rush. And if you let nature and wildlife take its time, its course, it's one thing I've learned over the years as well. Instead of rushing it and wanting that shot, pushing that shot, making that shot happen for the sake of what we think we need for a saleable image or video clip, instead of that energy, sitting back and letting the wildlife energy predict what unfolds, I've found at this stage of my career always come out further ahead. Things happen naturally with their behavior that wouldn't have happened if it was pushed or rushed, but turned out to be better in the end. So it's kind of what these longer trips in places like Newfoundland do as well. It's like a gift. The swimming video or photos, it was a gift to me. It was karma. It's something that we do a lot of when we go to wild places. I pick up garbage whenever I see it, and it's just in my mindset. It's like, I'm going to pick up this trash that unfortunately somebody threw out, but I'm going to clean up this landscape because it creates good karma. And when we're in coastal areas, if we're in coastal areas in Newfoundland, we got garbage bags, like huge heavy-duty garbage bags that you take up the whole back seat of the SUV, and she'd fill them each day, and we'd take them and throw them out. All kinds of little plastics, big plastics. I filmed a caribou calf along the coast picking up a blue recycling transparent bag and starting to eat it on this trip. And I'm like, the stag was, 15 yards from the calf, but it's a caribou. They're not like a moose or elk. They're not as dangerous, but I still respect their space. But I was going in there. If this calf actually starts to ingest that bag, I'm going in there and shaking this up and getting that bag. But thankfully it chewed, and then spat it out. And then, 10 minutes later I picked it up. And we collected a lot of stuff on this trip. But, I encourage people to do that, especially in wildlife areas. And it's good karma. But really, I guess in summary, trips like this, I've been craving it through COVID to have an extended trip in the wild. A month was fantastic. It's hard to come back because it just gives that perspective of just being in rhythm with nature. It slows us down. It's healthier. It's healthier for me. I know that.
Did you get any snow?
No. So one of the projects I'm working on, I need some caribou and snow. So I'm watching the forecast, and I'm going back the moment it looks like it'll last. But it's funny. We live in southern Ontario, at parallel latitude to northern California. It's colder here than it is in Newfoundland through the winter. Last winter, I think they said they didn't get any snow that stayed until January. And then the antlers, the females keep their antlers till spring, but the mature stags drop them in the first part of December. So I'm watching it like crazy, and if there's snow that sticks, I'm heading back to try and document some of that. But yeah, nothing on this trip. We watched for it, and there were frosty mornings, but nothing that would create snow. I've had it in other trips at that time of year to Newfoundland in October. Had a day or two, but more flurries and a dusting on the ground, not accumulation.
I don't think there's been a lot of snow in a lot of places yet.
We've had several of these little almost spring-like storms, and in fact, I looked outside today. It was kind of sleeting, and our grass is starting to green up again. We've got the bluegrasses, and their cool growing season. It's starting to green up. It was all dead and at the end of the summer, and man, it's crazy. That's my daughter just said. November we're getting all 4 seasons. You said Newfoundland, all 4 seasons in a day. We've definitely had it this month. It's been almost 70, and then of course, we've gotten snow too, but it's crazy this year.
It's almost the middle of November, and we're still our property here in Southern Ontario right now. A lot of places the leaves have blown off, but we're like peak color. This is not, still, it should have been gone weeks ago. It's, yeah, who knows, right?
Yeah, I was just in Wisconsin and Minnesota, and there was still lots of color. I mean, there's still a lot gone, but there was still lots of color still around. So, I don't know. I just don't have enough experience in a lot of these places for that time of year, so I hate to jump to conclusions. But the one thing that you referenced earlier that I experienced in Alaska, because I did a lot of coastal stuff this year, was the trash. The trash in these pristine wilderness areas that floats up from the ocean it's mind-boggling. You would think you'd be out there in the middle of nowhere and it would be pretty that pristine, but
scary.
You'd find flip-flops, you'd find toothbrushes, you'd find...
We found construction
the
hats.
number of
couple
buoys,
right?
Plastic buoys. I mean, if you wanted to start a fishing business, you wouldn't have to buy none of that stuff. You could just go cruise the coast and you could outfit your whole operation with just anything you want. It's crazy. And who knows how old that stuff is. Some of it's brand new. Some of it's probably been there for years and years. Who knows?
We were in Homer a couple years ago photographing the eagles. There was somebody who was telling us about because they had those glass bulbs, those glass buoys that come all the way from Japan and just catch a current and head northeast.
That's why we were looking for. We were on that glass ball hunting mission, and it's cool to find one because those are, I guess they still manufacture them and use them today. But if you find an old one, and I'm told you can go to some of these real obscure coasts and find them pretty readily, but the amount of money that it would take to get out to those locations, or the time that it would take to get out there, is, unless you're working out there, or you happen to be out there on another project, you're probably not going to go, or it's just not cost effective enough to go. But yeah, that's what we did. And I was with Drew on one of those trips, and he's like the glass ball finding king. So he was trying to teach me, you want to look up on this level and under these kind of logs and blah. And I didn't find it. But I did bring back a bunch of I don't know why, but I brought back a pile of plastic buoys. So if you are ever in Alaska and you need some buoys, I got them. If you want to set up some crab pots or something, I got you.
Well, Mark, it sounds like you got a little bit of a refresher.
It was a great taste, and I don't want to be greedy, but I want more. I want to slow life down more frequently like that, So it's now working on the mathematical equation or the life equation on how that's doable, at the same time as being ambitious and trying to create some content that is appealing and resonates a story that I'd like to tell that also has meaning and educational components. So I'm working on stuff like that. But yeah, snow in the forecast, and I'm gone again. But it won't be for more than a week or 10 days this time.
But you're going to go to Newfoundland. You're not going to go do caribou somewhere else. Does it have to be the Woodland, or can you go up and do barren ground?
It could be anywhere. I'm thinking of these ones just because I've got it fairly dialed in this year where they are, but I've also thinking of some out west too. If the weather doesn't turn wintry soon enough. And whereas in the Northern Rockies it is wintry now. There's snow and it's cold, so the caribou populations are hard to find in parts of the Rockies, but there's some around, so that could be an option.
I smell a wild and exposed trip to the Brooks Range.
Oh, sign me up. Yes.
Yeah, I'm in.
Fly in, tent camp for 2 weeks, guys.
And then float out on a river.
Oh, now you're talking. Right? All that action camera stuff, who's going to film underwater?
I got it.
Ron's going in. Ron's got the dry suit on.
Yep. He's got that water fetish anyway, so I think it'll be fine.
The fetish. I like it.
Yeah,
he's anytime we get someone on about the ocean, Mr. Wyoming boy has way more knowledge than I would have ever dreamed of about what goes on out there.
I'm telling you, I only had one form of entertainment on the ranch, buddy.
Jacques Cousteau.
Jacques Cousteau.
Let's do it. We could create some great content, tell some stories, share in a magical place with the audience portion that would be unable to go there.
So have you all watched that show, Being Caribou? We've talked about it on the podcast before, but have you watched that?
No, I've read the book and
you've not watched it?
No.
Oh my gosh, I think it is on YouTube.
Oh.
I think it's free. I don't think you even have to have Netflix. I think I found it on YouTube.
Okay.
But look, if it's not there, it's going to be on Prime or Netflix. And I just recently saw another book by that same guy,
Carson
about
Ewer.
Caribou too. So I didn't. Now that I know you're working on a project, I should. Next time I see it, I'll send it to you because it's probably good research stuff for you.
He did one. Was it the Y to Y from Yellowstone to the Yukon? I haven't read it yet. It's one of these things where when I see these books, I snap them up and buy them. Anything that resonates with me and my wilderness adventure spirit. And I believe, I haven't read it, but I believe he hiked it with his dog or something from Yellowstone to the Yukon in that corridor, that wildlife migration corridor. The idea of
Yeah, there's some videos of that coming out as well.
Okay. How cool would that be, right?
Seen or heard a little bit of advertisement.
I mean,
yeah, that'd be great.
Why not? I mean, I think last I heard, I've never met him, but I think he's a. Last I think I heard he's a warden in Banff now, or works in Banff. But there's adventures to be had, right? And we've all had good fortunes to have had some of them, but there's stories to be told and adventures to be had. Got to live this life once. Be smart about it, but go for it. That's a cool story, though. Being Caribou is a book that any nature enthusiast should read or watch the show. I will check that out, see if it's on YouTube or find it.
Kevin. He a recent guest. He's a great example of that. There's plenty of adventures to be had, and he's one that'll go out and get them. There's no doubt in my mind.
Well, and I think those adventures. So I was going to talk about this, and I decided no, but now it might be a good time. So you talk about being out there with the caribou, and it's just you and Pilly, right? Mm-hmm. And you're able to slow it down.
Right.
Well, I think that situation allows you to slow it down. If you're out in Yellowstone, if you're out in the Tetons, if you're out in Denali, a lot of times the hustle and bustle of people is just there whether you want it or not, and you can't escape it. So it's really hard to dial it back because you're like trying to be productive, But a lot of times you're always having to second guess what might be going on because of other people. Not that they're doing anything bad. It's just they're doing something that may not allow you to do what you're trying to do, and you just can't tell them no. They got just as much right to do whatever they want to do as you do. So when you can find those scenarios or those situations like what you had, that's magical, right? And there's plenty of places to do it still. You just got to find them. You just got to find your Newfoundland. You just got to find your...
Well, they're everywhere. You just don't go to the main spots that just are full of lots of attraction for other photographers or tourists. They're out there. They may not produce the same... They may or may not produce the same amount of content, but it's... Yeah, the crowds, it's harder to take. It's a different situation when in this situation, like moose, caribou will bed for 2-3 hours, right? They'll rest during the day, even during the rut, and so to chill out and just park it near them and do, whether it's moose or caribou, if it's quiet, I mean that's the soul food time, right? When they're up doing stuff or creating content, but to sit down and just chill out with them while they're sleeping, to hear them snore. They snore, right? To be able to sit there and hear that and kind of chuckle to ourselves inside and then just watch the landscape or something else happen, or that's what recharges us. But you're right to point that out, and I do find myself in some of those situations, but it's also far more fulfilling to me when it's quieter. You can share it with a few friends. But...
And you say they're out there, and they are, but they're hard to find. I mean, because you've got to take a lot of that time that, if you did go to a Yellowstone or you did go to a Denali, you're going to be more productive a lot faster, right? Whereas if you're going to spend 10 days just finding that cool spot, and that for a lot of people that's the amount of time they have to try to be productive. So it's not the perfect scenario, but you can find it. I guess that's just my point. Just go find it and be willing to give up that somewhat sure thing to go find your own oasis.
Well said.
It's a good place to call it. Find the Oasis. Another t-shirt.
That would be a good band name.
There probably is a band called Oasis. I'd be willing to bet.
50 or 60 of them.
Thanks for letting me share my story and relive my trip with you guys. It's good to see you, and I'm looking forward to Michael's story about his drive from Alaska to Colorado. Very different than the spring drive. Coming to a podcast on Wild and Exposed to you soon, if not already, depending on the sequence of events. And not to jump the gun, but for any of you that are interested in some fantastic merchandise or swag, great caps, winter beanies, t-shirts, hoodies, always expanding line that helps support our efforts here at Wild and Exposed Podcast, kindly visit our shop. You can find a link on Instagram or go to wildandexposed.com, and the shop is right there for your browsing, and there's no time like the present. This is not meant to rush anybody for the holidays, one day at a time, but due to shipping and timeliness of things this year, you may be prudent to order it sooner than later, and if you do, we thank you in advance. You can find more of our work on our YouTube channel. Yes, it's been quieter than we'd like this fall because I was missing in action in places like Newfoundland, but there's more and more content coming to YouTube. There's also a ton of it up there. Revisit past shows, guests, and some of our in-field podcasts to share with you there at Wild and Exposed Podcast. That's the search on YouTube. Please subscribe and give us a review. Those help us to gain traction on these busy platforms. Guys, it's been fantastic to share your company again. I hope to see you again soon, and one of these days share an adventure. I love Michael's idea of the Brooks Range, but keep them coming. Thank you for listening, everybody. Until next time, you've been listening to Wild and Exposed Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
We're gonna make it someday. Nothing's gonna get in our way. We will be the biggest band in town.